Hello everyone, welcome to week 1 of the IRIS Ruby on Rails Bootcamp. I hope that you all are doing well. I am Vedant Tarale, a second year undergrad at NITK and a web developer at IRIS. I'll be taking the session on web fundamentals. In this video, we'll be covering what web pages and websites are, the client server architecture, the MVC architecture, and the request response cycle. Let's hop on to the first topic. Web pages and websites. So what is a web page? It can simply be considered as a HTML document that generally has some CSS and JavaScript associated with it. HTML forms the basic structure of a web page. CSS adds styling to it, making it more presentable, and JavaScript gives it a dynamic nature and functionality such as submitting forms, etc. Everything on the web is presented as a web page. For example, the result of a Google search is displayed as a web page. Now coming to what a website is, it is nothing but a collection of various web pages under the same domain name. So when we refer to Wikipedia as a website, it encompasses all the web pages containing various articles that all come under the domain name of wikipedia.org. Here is an example of a web page of Wikipedia with and without CSS. We can see and appreciate the difference that CSS makes on how presentable a web page is. Moving on to the next topic, the client-server architecture. Every device on the internet can be broadly classified as a client or a server. In general, a device which requests for information is called a client, and the one which responds with the information is called the server. The division of devices into clients and servers is what this architecture is all about. The entire World Wide Web is based on the client-server architecture. So when you are accessing a website such as LinkedIn, your PC acts as a client and sends requests to the LinkedIn server, which responds to them. The advantages of this architecture include the server being a centralized system. All the data is stored at one location. It is cost effective, and the clients and servers can be changed independently, thus making this architecture easily scalable. Coming to the disadvantages, clients are prone to viruses, which may be present on the server. The server can be hacked and is prone to DOS attacks, as we saw in the case of Ames Delhi, where almost all of their servers were hacked. Data packets can be stolen or misdirected while transmission. This was a brief overview of the client-server architecture. Now we move on to the MVC architecture. MVC stands for Model, View, Controller. It is a design architecture that divides the application into three components, which I had mentioned before. MVC is one of the most frequently used development frameworks to create scalable projects. Frameworks such as Ruby on Rails and Django are based on the MVC architecture. Let us now look into the individual components and what they are meant for. Controller. Controller is what interconnects the model and the view. It can be considered as the brains of the application. Any request made by a client reaches an appropriate controller which processes it and generates a response. This response can contain data queried from the model part, which is presented in the views part as a web page. View. The view component is responsible for all the UI related logic and generally comprises of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files. We can also use CSS frameworks such as Bootstrap and Tailwind CSS in the views component. Views can also be dynamically updated with the data from models. This is where the controller plays its part. Model. Model is responsible for all the data related logic and is linked with the database of the application. Among all the three components of the MVC architecture, model is the only component that has direct access to the database. Thus, for a controller, the model acts as an intermediate between itself and the database. In simple terms, the controller requests data from the model, which the model fetches from the database and returns as the response to the controller. Now coming to the last part of this session, the request response cycle, and in specific the request response cycle in Rails MVC architecture. Let us consider the scenario depicted below. The client, using a web browser, sends a request to the Rails application. This request first goes to the Rails router, which does the job of forwarding the request to an appropriate controller. Once the request reaches the controller requests data from the model, which queries it from the database and returns it as a response to the controller. Now, the controller has the required data. Now it sends this data to the appropriate view and dynamically updates it. The view responds with the web page. At this point, our request is successfully completed. Now, the controller generates the response from the information it has put together from the model part and the view part and sends this as the final response to the browser which the user is operating. This completes the request response cycle. In practice, many such cycles operate simultaneously on the server side to generate responses for multiple clients. With this, we have covered all the topics of this session. Congratulations on completing this video lecture. Hoping to see you all participate actively in the discussions on the Discord server. Do reach out to us on the server in case of any doubts. If you wish to connect with me, I have put my LinkedIn ID here. With this, I'll be signing off. Thank you.